What's good, guys? Fantasy Joe here with my wide receiver league winners. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just put out my wide receiver rankings, my running back rankings. There's mock drafts every Monday. Check out all those content, fantasy profiles as well. Hit that like button, comment down below. I'll respond to all comments. Let me know what you think of these wide receiver league winners. Let me know who your wide receiver league winner is down below. So my first guy, honorable mention, Marquise Brown. 2021, he finished as a wide receiver 23, averaging 11.3 points per game and half-point PPR. Of course, that was in Baltimore. Super excited about him for this next upcoming season. Big reason being he has that prior connection already with Kyler Murray. They played together in college. While he was in college, Marquise Brown had a 27% target share from Kyler Murray. They've established that connection already, and they have complementary skill sets. Marquise Brown is primarily a deep ball receiver, a guy he has the speed, he can do things with the ball underneath. He's a complete route runner. He can get open and do things with the ball in his hands. But the deep passing attack is definitely a major part of his game and somewhere where he can excel for fantasy football because he can do a lot without a ton of targets. That said, I think he'll get a lot of volume to start the season because of his connection with Kyler Murray already and the suspension to DeAndre Hopkins to start the season. Like I said, I was talking about how this is a major upgrade for Kyler Murray. Let's look at a few things when it comes to the deep ball throwing. Major upgrade for Marquise Brown because of the Kyler Murray throwing ability deep. Last year, he was PFF's best deep ball thrower. To put that into perspective, compared to Lamar Jackson was last in accuracy percentage on deep balls last. Another thing to point out, Hopkins was not the same target hog he was in previous seasons. Last year, he was on pace for 109 targets. You compare this to the previous season where he's on pace for 160. That's a steep decline in usage rate. Then they trade a first-round pick for Marquise Brown. I don't think that's a coincidence necessarily. Obviously, I think DeAndre Hopkins is still going to be a big part of this offense, but I do think there's enough to go around in a passing attack that will likely have over 600 attempts. And I think Marquise Brown can thrive on 120 targets, honestly, with the efficiency that Kyler Murray has. And I think he could get even more. I view him as a top 12 wide receiver to start the season for the first 6 games and think he could still be a major contributor to fantasy lineups rest of season with his ability to get open and the opportunity he has in that offense. Currently, he's going as a wide receiver 22 in drafts. I have him ranked as a wide receiver 16, and like I said, I view him as a top 12 wide receiver to start the season. Christian Kirk, over the last 4 games of the season, when DeAndre Hopkins was out, was the top 12 wide receiver. I think Marquise Brown is an upgrade talent-wise from Christian Kirk, and I personally have him ranked as my wide receiver 16 this season. I'm projected for 80 receptions, 1,100 plus yards, and 8 plus touchdowns. I could seriously see him having a monster year and being a big difference maker for fantasy lineups. My first wide receiver league winner is Courtland Sutton. Last year finished as a wide receiver 46, averaging 7.1 points per game. Not a great season by any means, but he was still able to manage 776 receiving yards and only 98 targets, and those targets were from the likes of Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock last season. And last year he was coming off an ACL injury. I think he can get back to his 2019 form pre-injury, and in that season he had 1,100 yards, and that was with the likes of Joe Flacco and Trevor Siemian. Now he's a year removed from that injury, in a season where he already had 776 yards on 98 targets. He gets Russell Wilson, a major upgraded quarterback. He's a year removed from the injury, like I said. He gets Russell Wilson. I think their pass attempts go up, and I think he'll be more efficient from a player standpoint. So I think everything is pointing up for Courtland Sutton. He had a 19% target share last year. I think he can easily have a 20% target share this year. That would put him in line for at least 120 targets, which I think it could be more. Last year as well, he was 7th in air yards in the entire NFL, and that was only on 98 targets. 2nd in air yards per target, and Russell Wilson is the 6th highest rated quarterback on throws 20-plus air yards. Like I said with Marquise Brown, Courtland Sutton and Russell Wilson have very complementary skill sets. Courtland Sutton, 6'4", 220 pounds as well. I think he'll be used by Russell Wilson around the goal line a lot. Another thing to point out for Courtland Sutton, he has the easiest strength of schedule of all wide receivers heading into this season. And like I said, I have him projected, even if he gets a 20% target share, which he had 19% last year, I think they'll have 600 attempts as an offense this year. That'd be 120 targets. Let's look at the type of targets that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett have been receiving in previous years in a much less pass-heavy offense in Seattle. Last 2 years, DK's had 129 targets, pretty similar to that 120 range I was talking about with Courtland Sutton. I think is somewhat of a baseline for him. Let's look at Tyler Lockett, 110 targets, 132 targets, 107 targets. He's thrived for fantasy football with that kind of targets from Russell Wilson because he's able to run deep. Courtland Sutton goes deep as well and is a big-bodied receiver around the goal line for Russell Wilson to throw to. Like I said, I think he's a very talented receiver. Proved that in 2019 when he had that 1,100-yard season with Joe Flacco and Trevor Siemian. A year removed from that ACL injury with Russell Wilson in the fold, I have him viewed as a monster season. Currently going as a wide receiver 26 in drafts. He's my wide receiver 11. I'm projected for 80-plus receptions, 1,200-plus yards, and 8-plus touchdowns. Think he could easily be in that double-digit touchdown range and be an absolute winner for fantasy football leagues all around. One of the major reasons I believe in him as well, if we look at the pie with Russell Wilson, if we remove 2021 where he was injured and returned from that injury a little too early in my opinion, he had 4 straight 30-plus touchdown campaigns. When you have a quarterback who's going to throw, I think, close to 40 touchdowns this season, especially in that division where they'll likely have to score a lot of points, those receivers have to catch a lot of touchdowns, and that's why I think Courtland Sutton has so much upside this season. If Russ does come out and throw 35, 40 touchdowns, I think Courtland Sutton could easily have 10, 12 touchdowns and be a major contributor to winning your fantasy title. My next wide receiver league winner is Mike Williams. In 2021, finished as a wide receiver 10, averaging 13 points per game. And let me just lay out this situation for you guys, because I really don't understand why Mike Williams is going so late in drafts. Last year, he finishes as wide receiver 1. In the offseason, the Chargers come out and give him a 3-year, $60 million extension with $40 million guaranteed. A ton of money to say we want to keep you around and keep you a major part of this offense. Now, like I said, he's a highly talented wide receiver who is the wide receiver 10 last year in fantasy football. Justin Herbert's back. They gave him a massive extension, and now in drafts he's going as the wide receiver 19. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and that's why I view him as such a major league winner this year. I think if anything, he was slowed down a little bit by that knee injury last year. If we look at his targets, before week 5, they were 10.2. After week 5, it was 7.1, and he was limited in the next game following week 5. Didn't miss that game, but was limited snaps-wise in a major way right afterwards. And like I said, there's the big tick down in usage, so it's likely to infer that he was banged up. But I don't think that amount of usage, 10 targets a game, is outside the realm of possibilities for him. Maybe not over an entire season, but I think he will be heavily used when he's healthy. And it's a big play wide receiver who, when he receives that type of usage from a highly efficient quarterback like Justin Herbert, will be highly productive for fantasy football. Last year, he had 129 targets for 76 receptions, 1,146 yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns. In 2019 as well, he had 1,000 receiving yards. In 2018, he had 10 receiving touchdowns. He's flashed brilliance before. His ability to produce in both those fields, down the field as a receiver and the red zone. He did a whole lot of that last year as well. Honestly, he's my number 1 league winner to me at the wide receiver position, him and Courtland Sutton, because he could receive that usage that he got before week 5. And if he gets that, he could just have, 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and just destroy every league around. He was volatile last year. You do have to bake that in a little bit, but when he can give you those type of explosion games where he wins your week, he's worthy of sticking in that flex. And when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert who's going to go out there and throw 35, 40 touchdowns, I love taking one of these big-time touchdown guys in their offense. Mike Williams is entering his age 28 season. Keenan Allen is 30. Last year, Mike Williams had a better grade than Keenan Allen and more yards per route run. Keenan Allen has declined in yards per route run several years in a row. I just honestly think Mike Williams is the better receiver, receives more high-value targets, and has the likelihood of his targets going up next season as well. All of this, you're getting at wide receiver 19 currently in drafts. He's my wide receiver 10. Absolutely love drafting Mike Williams in drafts and think he's absolutely going to smash his ADP this year and be a guy who can win your league. I've been projected for 80-plus receptions, 1,200-plus yards, and 10-plus touchdowns. My next wide receiver is Gabe Davis. 2021 finished as wide receiver 53, averaging 7.2 points per game. The exciting thing for Gabe Davis is there are a ton of vacated targets in this Bills offense, 199 vacated targets, over 30% of their targets gone, over 30% of their air yards gone. Basically a perfect opening for that number 2 wide receiver role. And if we look at his usage over the last 6 games of last season, he averaged 19.8 PPR points over the last 6 games and ran a route on 88% of their pass plays. He has an established rapport with Josh Allen, being there the last 2 years. They've been successful together. Even though he hasn't gotten a ton of targets, he still had a ton. He has an established rapport with Josh Allen the last 2 years already being there. I think that gives him an advantage over Jamison Crowder coming in and some of these other guys coming in, rookies. And I think he's a very talented wide receiver. He was ranked top 10 according to PFF last year in wide receiver grade. Has a ton of touchdown upside with Josh Allen, who the last 2 years has 36 and 37 passing touchdowns. And if we look at the targets that Gabe Davis has received the last 2 years, 62 targets, 7 receiving touchdowns, 63 targets, 6 receiving touchdowns. That's a ton of touchdowns per target. That's a very efficient target per touchdown rate, meaning he's used around the goal line, he's used in the red zone. I think he'll continue to be this upcoming season. He's 6'3". He's got that skill set. He's bigger than Stephon Diggs. He scored 4 touchdowns, obviously, in the AFC Championship game, but that's not really the reason to me why Gabe Davis is so high up on this list. He was a dynasty buy low for me 2 years ago because of this upcoming season. I saw the opportunity that was going to be there for him. I think he can be the number 2 option in this offense that's extremely pass heavy. Last year, 5th in attempts the Bills were. I think that could even go up a little bit this season. And like I said, when you have one of these quarterbacks like Josh Allen who could be throwing 35, 40 touchdowns, there's a theme to some of these wide receivers on this list, guys. They put big-time quarterbacks and they have big-time opportunities, and they're being drafted very late. Currently, Gabe Davis, 7th round pick, going past wide receiver 30, back end of the 7th round. You might be looking at him in the 8th round. I think he'll end up going in the 7th round, maybe even 6th round of drafts, though. I think he's worthy of a 7th round pick. I love the value there, honestly. He's ranked as my wide receiver 24. I think he actually just absolutely smashed that even. I think that's baked in, I think he might be a little volatile because I think he's going to be such a big-time touchdown scorer. But with the opportunity he has there, I think he gets 1,000 yards. He doesn't need a ton of targets because he is a big play wide receiver, and I think he'll be utilized around the goal line. I have him with 70-plus receptions, 1,050-plus yards, and 9-plus touchdowns. Guys, if you made it to this point in the video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. I really appreciate you guys watching. This has been Fantasy Joe. I'll see you guys next time.